Okay. And we are being live streamed. Okay. So I would like to start by introducing our moderators for the first session. We have Munson Kwok, past national president from Los Angeles, and Davis Chen, also past national president from San Francisco. Munson, would you like to start? I'm going to hand it over to you. Oh, yeah, unmute, Munson.
Forgot to unmute. Sorry about that. Okay. All right, everybody see me here? Now, is there a share screen?
Yes, please.
Okay. And yeah, what I've got to do is just bring it on. Sorry about that. We were trying something else and then slideshow, boom. Okay, does everybody see this?
Oh yeah, Munson, you look younger on my screen.
Do you see the view graph title?
We see your desktop.
Okay, do you see the title slide?
No.
No, you shared the wrong screen. Try to reshare.
Yeah.
Stop share.
And click on the title slide and double click.
How's this?
No.
Stop share. Stop
Can you?
sharing.
Here we
ahead.
go. You're good.
Oh, you're
I am good?
You're good.
All
And
right,
now it's working.
It's working.
all right, sorry about that. I guess I didn't master this last step with Zoom. I was trying a bunch of other things. All right, okay. I guess as usual, we wasted 5 minutes of working with Zoom. Welcome, everybody. Almost to this very hour, we can mark exactly 100 years since the dedication of the Chinese American Citizens Alliance headquarters. And that's literally true. And that's today, August the 10th. The ceremony was in the afternoon Pacific time. Davis and I want to introduce a new short film on cruising headquarters, especially prepared for this occasion by Barry Wong. Most of our nearly 2,000 members never get a chance to see this building up close and personal, even when present for a convention. We know we have a historically significant building. The National Board has acted to nominate it to the National Register of Historic Places. We are responding to a national movement to make Asian Pacific Islander Americans more visible as Americans by advancing our history, as you just heard from Congresswoman Meng, the reasons why. I have to. Okay. I have to be prompted because it's not the. Santayana, the philosopher, has said, those who do not remember the past are condemned to repeat it. I think our CAC 126 years suggests the following: heal the past to build for the future. From 1920 to today, which is, you can see our front has little changed and it remains very distinctively institutional facade today in Chinatown. The middle picture is from a collection by architectural historian Philip Choi and his son. Shortly thereafter, in 1982, a storefront for herbs, dry goods, and store was added for more rental income. Secretary Jewell issued the challenge to us APIAs in 2014. Join in. A comment on the nominating. It provides more visibility and more acceptance for Chinese in this country. It would bring recognition to CACA nationally. It puts no burden or economic encumbrance on the property itself. Nominating form does require Number one, the significance of the building, namely design-wise and form-wise. And then number two, more important to us, the historical significance of the place, which for us as a single owner is the historical impact of the CACA itself. CACA was formed directly in reaction to the Chinese Exclusion Act. No ifs and buts about that. We always claimed to be a civil rights group from the get-go. It turns out we can now prove we were. From the first major goal as we were citizens, members, was to obtain the rights and the mechanics to vote in the city of San Francisco, then the state, then the national elections. In spite of citizenship, voting rights had to be argued for, bartered for, and hence we promptly became a civil rights activist. And the issues since then have never stopped. By mid-1890s, several hundred American-born Chinese men lived in San Francisco, mostly Chinatown. A core group, perhaps 20, claim 500 members and San Francisco Chinatown young men eligible and over 2,000 statewide to vote. The first accounts of the group appeared in 1893 of them organizing to possibly join a Native Californians fraternity, which became the infrastructure model and our internal culture. San Francisco American newspapers track their progress. This is the kind of front row English press we were already getting before 1900 because the threat of a Chinese bloc vote during a pivot point in San Francisco politics. In Gunn, one of the people here, what you just saw, was lead organizer of the core group. Lee Wing Tai was treasurer, another significant person, and you all know Chen Duck was the president. The third president was UC grad Robert Leung Park, here featured, who co-wrote the 1895 bylaws we still use. And if any one of you sharp-eyed, you can see the things that he was doing in it, being interviewed. In 1904, upper right, Walter Ulam enters the picture and re-energizes the group, taking the baton from Ngan, who remained. He became later United Parlor, that is, then the Grand President. Ulam greatly expands the membership, reaches the rest of California, then out of state to Chicago and Portland, and with early interactions into New York, Chinatown, and Boston about immigration. The NSGS-CACA quickly becomes embroiled on the issues generated by the exclusion era. Exclusion again. Individual cases to be mediated or advised. Unofficial certifications of citizenship before traveling around the country even. An insurance program started due to discrimination, denial of insurance to our members, growing membership payments and donations. So the call was made to for a walk-in center with an established address to service all these memberships at the stable address for operations, the stuff that I described above. The decision is made in 1915 to seek a site and construct a headquarters. Now I got to tell you a little bit about the building. I don't want to tell you very much technical. That was taken care of in the application. The context within San Francisco Chinatown is important. The board seemed to stress deliberately an Americanized style set apart from other rebuilt institutional buildings then going up in Chinatown, and certainly a dramatic separation from the stereotypical Oriental style of Ross and Berggren on institutional commercial tourist Grant Avenue. I put a center line down the middle of the picture of the building here. Architect Rogers appeared to be a master of style. A major feature of Beaux Arts is perfect symmetry. So if you go up the grand stairs into the grand lobby, even today, and into our auditorium, you can walk a center line of symmetry inside this building, all the way to the stage, through the back wall. Interior features follow up on the Beaux Arts theme. So finally, here we are, August 10th. I think it's the afternoon. Everybody's who are the members are in the white tie and tails, very formal. befitting wear of an elite fraternity of this era. This was commonplace. We weren't being extra elitist or anything. It's just the way things were done. This is a split combined photo with a print up of the stage. You can see here that there's a dividing line in the stage. The key speakers pictured included Governor William Stevens of California. So now the actions and policies of the CACA in seeking immigration rights and better treatment of Chinese under the Chinese Exclusion Act during this era are the most cited in articles and books. Following repeal of the Chinese Exclusion Act, 1943, and the end of World War II, 1945, Chinese Americans and thus CACA reached turning points. You can see what we've done in the view graph here. The passage and signing of the Alien Wives Act, culmination of a 20-year CACA effort led by Y.C. Hong and Walter U. Lum. Now we reach the times in history that many of you are eyewitness to and are familiar with. We pick one to highlight. For CACA, changes occurred in many ways, internal to the organization, external to the community. After the 1965 Immigration Act admitting many more folks with Chinese ancestry, our internal culture had to begin adjusting. Internally in the infrastructure and the changing demographics of our population, as we are allowed to move out of our ghettos, for example. This meant closing of some chapters, opening new ones elsewhere, or reopening them. It was to the good. We went down to 6 lodges after World War II, and today we have 20. This meant changing membership requirements too, embracing all citizens, native or naturalized, lowering the age of voting age as the voting age itself lowers to 18 years of age. And above all, as with all fraternities, resolving the gender issue, finally having women as full members. CACA first introduced this resolution in 1951, debated it over a quarter of a century, finally passing it in 1977. Ethnicity requirements, that is Chinese ancestry, was removed by the turn of the 21st century.
Please check the number and dial again. Announcement for
require dedication to mission and betterment of the Chinese communities. CACA is prime community organization of movers for the apologies resolutions. Actually, it's Judy Chu, our member, for congressional passage, apologies for the congressional passage of the Chinese Exclusion Act. Assisting Representative Chu and Senator Feinstein, California, in the Senate for the joint resolutions. The National President Carolyn Chan and Vice President Ted Gong spearheaded our involvement. To get passage, the minority party forced us to change that language to expressions of regret. Discrimination and harassment continues to persist even 8 decades after the repeal. CACA has helped initiate coalitions seeking justice in many cases, including Vincent Chin and Wenho Lee, and the recent racial profiling victims. Externally, CACA found during our apologies campaign residual effects and stigmas still of exclusion, which turn out to be generational among families. We have launched programs in dialogue and public education. Now we seek parity in American citizenship as one of the paths to acculturation. This means parity in the rights, the privileges, the recognition, and the respect we should have in citizenship. In turn, an important part of that is setting our history right. We have initiated cultural and historic preservation as an added purpose and objective, just in 2011. Nomination of headquarters to the National Register is one of these efforts. Many still challenge and question our patriotism. You heard Congresswoman Meng just say that. The Chinese American World War II Veterans Recognition Project, originated by National President Ed Gore, Major General Bill Chen, his peers, and the board in 2015, has been our latest great contribution to give respect and honor to the sacrifice of those in the greatest generation. Okay, we promised a gift gold medal replica to every veteran or family who signed up with us free. So as the Bureau of the Mint has now punched out the replicas, the local lodges are distributing them here up to date in our auditorium on July 3rd and 4th is one of the 8 sessions giving out over 800 replicas. Presented live by Chinese Americans generals. So because of the nomination, we have a pretty good historical narrative today, backdated up to today and backdated from 1912 back to 1893. This building, our building, stands for the narrative, our legacy for America. So Davis.
Stop sharing.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear
Yes.
you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Thanks, Munson, for that very detailed report. Our national headquarters, which is located on Stockton Street between Washington and Jackson Streets in the heart of San Francisco's Chinatown. Each day, tens of thousands of pedestrians walk past the building without giving much of a glance to our unassuming building. And whether you've attended a past national convention in San Francisco or a national board meeting, or perhaps even one of our events, social events that are hosted by San Francisco Lodge, the discussion of our national headquarters oftentimes comes up. However, unless you visited the national headquarters, not many people are very familiar with the headquarters or the building itself. So last year we came up with the idea of documenting and providing a glimpse of the building to not only members who perhaps live outside of the San Francisco Bay Area, but to the general public. We're a very long-standing, reputable organization with an extraordinary history, and we should be able to showcase our building, which is really a jewel box within the San Francisco community. As I said earlier, it's a very unassuming building when you walk by, but once people actually walk into the building, into the foyer and into the auditorium, they're kind of awestruck about the size and the enormity of the auditorium and the building, something that's very surprising to most visitors, because you don't expect this facility and venue to be inside this building that people walk by every day without giving a second glance to. So we worked with local San Francisco filmmaker Barry Fong, who's done many different projects on documenting and showcasing not only the national headquarters buildings, the 5 levels of the buildings, including the 3 social levels and the 2 residential levels on the top of the building, but we also want to provide a history of our organization. And I think the film is still under development. It's Barry still fine-tuning and polishing the video, but today we want to be able to share with all of you. All of you are going to be able to see the first glimpse of this video. So I'll give it to Melanie, who will now play the video for you.
I think we have Kalani. Are you playing the video now? Or do you need me to play that? Oh, I see. Oh, Connie, can you unshare your screen? Okay.
Hi, can everyone see the video?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Greetings from 1044 Stockton Street. Located in the heart of San Francisco's historic and vibrant Chinatown, it's also the home to one of the nation's oldest civil rights organizations, the Chinese American Citizens Alliance. Welcome to its national headquarters. Founded in 1895 as the Native Sons of the Golden State, the organization was formed to combat against discrimination and prejudice towards Chinese Americans in the areas of housing, employment, education, financial services, and insurance, just to name a few. 20 years later, in 1915, the organization changed its charter and its name to the Chinese American Citizens Alliance. Join me and my colleagues as we provide you insight of the rich and storied history of our organization and a glimpse of this extraordinary and historic landmark building celebrating its 100th year in 2021.
So CACA was founded in 1895. A group of Chinese American men who were born here in the United States.
And they were also under the impression this is a democratic society until 1893. The dozens of young Chinese Americans decided to apply to become one of the chapter of the Native Sons of Golden West, and they got rejected. And then suddenly they start realizing, how much they were excluded.
So they decided that they needed to form their own organization, the Native Sons of the Golden State, which was modeled after that initial organization. And their focus at the time was really advocacy for the Chinese Americans here in the United States to ensure that we had the same rights and privileges as any other Americans. Back then, the Chinese did not have health care. They were not allowed to buy insurance. They were not allowed to buy property. So they were at very distinct disadvantage compared to the rest of San Francisco.
For example, fraternities you can join, fraternities you cannot join, social clubs, activities that you're allowed in but implicitly not allowed into, groups that you can socialize in but perhaps not.
I think if you lived in that era, you kind of just put up with it because that was kind of the way it was, unfortunately. And I think my dad knew that with an organization behind, you have a little bit more clout to be able to fight that kind of thing.
We actually realized that we cannot just fight by ourselves. We cannot just fight for our own communities. We are fighting for a better society that we can all enjoy in, and that we need to work with other communities.
The building is actually a multi-story building. The first few floors are dedicated to the organization, and the top 2-3 floors are apartments.
If you're an artist or an architect, you would like to look at the design and what influenced the design of this building compared to other buildings in Chinatown. And I noticed that there is some resemblance to the Masons, the Freemasons, on the structure, the traditions, and their rituals. And this is where I would have loved to ask, Walter Ulam himself, why did you guys decide to go to a modern kind of a building versus the traditional Chinatown building?
We have a large auditorium with a stage. So we probably can fit about 250, maybe 300 people total in the auditorium. And so it was designed to have meetings, to have events, to have social events, to have performances. We also have events that showcase, AAPI talent. For example, we have film showing by Chinese American film producers, and we actually had a very, very young Yo-Yo Ma performed with his cello here. He was probably in his early teens at the time.
Today, we're having a presentation to all the Chinese American veteran war of World War II. give present the award, a medal.
So we were successful in advocating and getting legislation passed for the Chinese American veteran World War II recognition Congressional Gold Medal project. And so Congress approved and passed the legislation. This was signed, the bill was signed by President Trump in 2018. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, it put a little bit of a delay in our presentation of the medal to the veterans, the surviving spouses, and the next of kin. So earlier this year, we were able to start awarding the medals to the living veterans, many who are in their late 90s and 100.
Throughout the decades, CACA has spearheaded efforts against unfair immigration laws and hate crimes, and has promoted naturalization and citizenship, voter education and registration, and equal economic and educational opportunities.
And so the CACA mission in the early days was always to serve the members and the members' needs. In doing that, the serendipity and the extension is that they actually reflected the needs and the issues and the desperate wants of the community, each local community and the national community of Chinese in the United States. So beginning with local, then state and national elections, starting with the CACA, the drive began in San Francisco to try to be sure that Chinese Americans who were definitely citizens had the right to vote and could vote.
So one of the big things was to ensure health care for the Chinese in San Francisco. A group of organizations, Chinese organizations, of which CACA was one, banded together to form and to fund what is now the Chinese hospital, which still serves the community in a culturally, ethnically sensitive manner.
One of the ways to fight it, besides just changing laws and all that, is just being out in the community. If people know that Chinese are not all these, crazy people or we don't all spread virus, whatever the thing that they think we do, if you become friends with people, then they begin to see, oh, you're just like us or whatever. And I think that gets rid of the racism.
People do not know how significant the organization have, contribute to the, overall experiences of Chinese Americans and the impact that the CACA had, created. And then for us to actually enjoy, what we have, today.
Moving upstairs, this is where the National has most of their meetings. We have the big boardroom where I'm sitting right now. So this boardroom is used for national meetings and the San Francisco Lodge meetings. And we have several smaller offices that right now they're used for storage or for archives. But in the past, some of these offices, we believe, were actually small bedrooms that were used for people who are coming in for board meetings to stay. Because if you think about it, back in the early 1900s, there wasn't the hotels that you have today, and Chinese couldn't stay. They couldn't just go to the Hilton and stay overnight. And traveling, coming from Washington D.C. or Houston was a big deal, and people had to stay. So when I sit here in the boardroom, and if you look at the boardroom here, you see this heavy oak table. And these chairs, and they've probably been here for decades and decades. And when I sit here, I think about, what they did to serve the community and what responsibility that we have as the current leaders of the organization to continue that legacy. And it's, although our focus may be a little bit different, there's still an important focus on combating racism, combating anti-Asian hate, and making sure people understand that we as Chinese Americans contribute, to the United States, to America, just like everybody else. Above us, we have apartments. We have apartments that are either SROs or single residency occupancy. So they have a shared kitchen and shared bathroom, and we also have a few one-bedroom apartments. And these are generally low rent units, and they really serve a lot of the population, especially the elderly population, who could not afford to live, anywhere else in San Francisco.
Oh, it's usually immigrants, newcomers from China, or people from out of the city. Come from New York, Carolina, Chicago. They look for places to live, single room occupancy, low rent, very low rent. So the thing is, we're a non-profit, so the income we don't. I don't think we pay much, very little. But property tax we still have to pay a lot, and at the same time, it does help the CACA, Chinese American Citizens Alliance, with their expenses for civil rights or for the community itself.
Downstairs, we have a kitchen. It's actually a restaurant style kitchen, and we have a little dining area there, which a lot of people on Fridays, they play mahjong. So you do hear the clack, clack, clack of the tiles on Friday night. And there's actually even a backyard with a barbecue. So we do throw dinner events here monthly. They're theme events such as Italian night. One of our more popular ones is Hawaiian night, Western night, and we roll out the barbecue, we cook a meal for about 200 people here. So it's a lot of coordination, but it's a lot of fun, and it really brings the people in the organization together. So this building, it's going to be 100 years old this year on August 9, 2021. And it has a significance because for me personally, when I come into this building, I think about, those who built the building, designed the building, back in the early 20s. What were they thinking about? What did they intend this building to do? And how did it serve the community? An example is every Christmas, we have a children's Christmas party. In which we have someone dressing up as Santa Claus, and we have the kids from the local school. They come, and there's gifts, and there's a play, and they sing, and they have a wonderful time. And I still meet people now, who are adults, and they're probably my age, and they tell me, oh yeah, I remember coming into this building, as a kid, and I met Santa Claus, and I got a present. So that hasn't changed, right? How we serve the community.
This building symbolizes something. The face of it has become iconic. We argue architecturally why it looks the way it does. Different from the rest of Chinatown, if you take a good look at it.
We stay here today in this building reminds me of how many our CACA pioneers have contributed toward to, the good system that we are able to enjoy, but however, it's not perfect yet.
It's significant because it has remained for a century, literally a century. This year, the headquarters of the organization, now known as Chinese American Citizens Alliance. When it first started, it wasn't. First, the view was it was just going to be a California group, but very, very quickly, people throughout the nation felt they needed this kind of group because of immigration and travel issues. And the CACA, even in the earliest days, had the talent and the people well positioned to help people throughout the entire nation. But we as a people, Chinese Americans in the United States, need to know every aspect of what we have done. It is just not only the stereotypic gold miner, and then, you know, some discrimination occurs, and then transcontinental railroad worker, laborer, and then later to be followed by more discrimination. A lot more has happened here. A lot more has been achieved by the Chinese Americans, even under the yoke of exclusion. And it is part of that story, not as much as even to tell the mainstream United States and the people who all live here, but also just as much to assure and tell our people that they have a heritage and a past in America.
This organization is continuously going to be in existence because we are going to be very important part of the society. And if we are not working toward that, then we won't get there. And there's openness of working with others, the openness of including the young people. These are all part of that. What you are looking at is open door.
What happens to one is happening to all. So basically, we feel now like it's essential to do coalitions that even go beyond the stovepiping of our own APIA world, that we must be working all together as people of diversity.
How do we attract younger members and for them to understand that the challenges that we face is no difference? Because a lot of people, you know, especially maybe in the Bay Area, potentially they kind of live a little bit in a bubble, right? They may not see the racism and be exposed to a lot of the prejudice a lot of other communities outside of San Francisco face. And so how do we make people see that and understand that everyone has a role in combating that?
We need to get the younger generation not to say, well, that's my dad or my grandpa or my mom's organization. I don't want to be part of that.
I'm always gratified I get a chance to come back and look at it again. And recently, after this pandemic shutdown, actually looking at the changes. Looks like it's revitalized, looks like it's going to come back, and I'm so excited.
Right. I hope everyone enjoyed the film. Munson and Davis, do you have any last comments about our history?
I think we've said it. Davis,
Yes,
all yours.
Thank you. Okay. I do hope everyone enjoyed it. And please, you know, this is going to be on YouTube. Please share this, you know, with your fellow lodge members and encourage everyone to watch it to really understand the history and the legacy of CACA. Right now, what I would like to do is I'm going to hand it over now to Ted. Ted's our VP of Policy and Public Engagement. And Ted's going to talk about the Summit Tunnels and why it's so important. Why the Summit Tunnel? What is it? And why is it so important to make it a national monument? Ted, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Hey, thanks. Let's see if we could share screen. See how that works. So, actually, I'm starting off at a little different angle. I'm using December 17, that date, and that date is a date for us always to remember. It's really a key part of our national heritage, which we really don't think about too much as we think about 1882 and all the exclusion laws and things that happened. December 17 was the day when the exclusion laws was rescinded by Congress. I think when I first joined the CACA, there was an effort to say, can we make December 17 a national holiday for us and for the country? And I don't think that ever came about. There were a lot of reasons for that. But the more and more I got into these things, talking about the historical preservation and the Summit Tunnel, I would like us to rethink that. December 17th, maybe making a national holiday. Certainly in the last 2 or 3 years, I promoted that day as a day when all of us, the lodges, should show a film or remember that this thing was a celebration of us, all of us who contributed to the building of the nation. This is a picture of people walking through the snow sheds. Of course, in the 1880s, they weren't built in these cement styles, but the snow sheds were built with wood and so forth. But I think it captures some of the beginnings of what we think. You can think that maybe our workers were walking through this, and as we go through this tunnel, this is part of the railroad tracks have been taken off, the steel tracks, but you're walking and you're entering the tunnel, and you begin to imagine what is it that you actually begin to see. So you're going around the bend, and you begin to appreciate what has happened to these tunnels. Graffiti is all over the place, and it's this type of graffiti. And there's a lot of it's an uncontrolled growth. So it's actually it's promoted. There's a whole community that promotes the whole tunnels as a place that's supposed to be their palette to paint the way they want. It's supported by all sorts of organizations and various websites that talk about this. It's spreading out all over the outside of the walls. It's becoming almost the most important thing to see and do, to the extent where people come here, they actually take pictures next to the graffiti that's spreading all over the walls. Now, remember what this place was. You know, this was a place where these people, Jing Cui, Wang Fuk, and Xiao Wing were building this railroad. Many people lost their lives probably in the building of the Transcontinental Railroad. There was probably about 2,000 people lost building this. But it's interesting. This is from the 50th anniversary of the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad. And the Chinese railroad workers were still so respected that at the completion of the railroad in 1869, it was a Chinese crew of 8 that laid the final rail. If you think about what kind of honor that was, that of all the crews that they chose a Chinese crew to do that. And in the 50th anniversary, these are 3 of the 8 survivors of the people who laid that final rail. There was that much respect for the Chinese and the work that they've done. But of course, I actually had here a photograph of the Champagne photo in which the 2 railroads come together, and there's no Chinese in the scene. So between the 50th anniversary and that scene, somehow Chinese got whitewashed, disappeared. And so what's happening now in the walls is it's still being disappeared, literally being washed away, painted over. And so there's a picture that goes with this, there's a caption that goes with this picture that says, "What do I most remember about this visit to the Summit Tunnel? Did you see the tin blue monsters that are against the wall?" So the question is, what do we do about national monuments and landmarks? What we did was this year we were able to get the National Trust for Historic Preservation to declare the tunnels as one of the 11 most endangered historic places in the United States, in America. And what that does for us is it sets us on the stage to make this thing a national monument. And unfortunately, I think I got the wrong set of slides here, but the national monuments tried to do this. They're a rare listing of preserving and passing to our next generations the values and stories we deem most important as a nation. It's up to us as a community. We have community responsibility to take care of it. It's a national effort and it's personal engagement. Yes, here's the national, and so that's what we're trying to do. The National Trust of Historic Preservation in June declared this one of the 11 most endangered historic places in America. So I want to talk very quickly about what we're talking about. There have been previous efforts to sort of like draw out what made up the national monument that we're trying to establish. The red is a boundary that somebody had put up. There are several of these kind of maps suggesting where those boundaries are. One of the problems with declaring this place a national monument is that the sites that are part of what we want to dedicate as the monument cross different jurisdiction lines. So there's 2 counties involved. There's public-private property. Park Service owns part of the land, and other people own others. There's a catfish pond up here. If you guys you don't think about the Summit Tunnel, but very quickly, there's a catfish pond up here, which people wonder, why is the catfish pond up there? And it's an enclosed pond where people grew catfish. And the thinking is that when the Chinese were building the railroad, and they had a huge camp right about in this area, they had stocked this place with catfish. And those catfish still live in this place. So if you ever walk up there, you could take a look at that. But here is the area that we're talking about. This is the Donner Pass Road, but the tunnel is going to go across here. I have a better picture here. This is part of the Donner Ski Ranch. We're trying to declare number 6, tunnel number 6, number 7, and number 8. There are 15 tunnels in total in the building of this crossing of the Sierra Nevadas. It's tunnel 6, 7, 8. There's a wall here. It's part of a retaining wall that's called China Wall, and there's a camp. There's a better looking map. It's a little bit clearer. So the tunnel is underneath here. It goes across here like this. It emerges on this side, tunnel, and emerges on this side. And the China Wall is right about here. And then there's a tunnel number 8. If you keep walking down over here, you get to this highway, part of a Donner Pass Road, which connects with Highway 80. China Camp is where maybe 2,000 or 3,000 Chinese lived for almost 3 years, building these, particularly these tunnels, but all the other tunnels along the way. The tunnel shaft and so forth, the center shaft. This is the shaft in which the people were building this tunnel, tunnel 6, the east end and the west end. And then the going was too slow to build the tunnel in both directions. So they hauled up a railroad engine, dug a hole straight down from the top here to the bed of the railroad track, and opened up 2 more fronts. So you can build going this way, this way, this way. So what we're trying to do is we've selected this area, and we are going to try to make that into a national monument. So what I want to do is go very quickly, all the various steps that led to where we are now. We're about to make a presentation to Congress. But this was a long-term effort. And as I go through some of the steps or the highlights here, and many people will be familiar about the little pieces that fell in place, but all of it was a total effort. And not all the time did we know that we were heading to this point in the selection of the Summit Tunnel. So almost 10 years ago, in the 1882 symposium, U.S. Forests, we were trying to promote heritage tours. That was done in the Northwest with Ranger Dale Hall and the Wing Looker Museum. And we tried duplicating those in California. Munson was very much involved in those in trying to figure out how we could do that. Also, Rick Ng and others were involved, but we were never able to do the same thing that they tried to do in Wing Look for a number of reasons. But in the process, we developed a huge network of contacts and advisors, both in California, particularly with the Forest Service. And in DC, we developed strong connections with the Department of the Interior, particularly with 2 groups. One that was working on theme study, that's the Asian American theme study that was written in the Clinton period. But then, and then the division that was responsible for that was also began to have a lot of interactions with them. They happened to be the division that was responsible for historical nomination for historical monuments. So the basis of many of the things that we're about to do came almost 10 years ago for something not really related to Summit Tunnel. The Summit Tunnel was only one of the areas that we were looking at, one of the historical sites we were looking at. Our goal was not any particular site, but we wanted to promote the concept of developing self-sustaining qualitative programs through heritage tours or roundups. And these were all, we wanted them based on a public-private partnerships. A lot of that stuff didn't come about. We would get travel agents and other people would say, well, I can run a tour, but I don't know how we can sustain it. So I don't know how it can be commercially viable. So that became a problem for a long time. We also couldn't find a local common, consistent partner for us in the local area. But so about 3 years before the 150th anniversary of the Transcontinental, we began the first tour to the Summit Tunnel, and we took it on ourselves. 1882 symposium took it on and started building up. And the summit was not really the focus. It was that we, after paring down some of the issues that related to the heritage tours as they were being done in the Wing Look Museum, we decided to help have a shortened, concise thing, which is like an overnighter trip from Sacramento to the Summit Tunnel. And that was the first heritage tour. It was actually done to see a sort of a proof of concept. Can we do it? Can we do it and still not lose money in doing it? And that worked. But at that time, Summit Tunnel began to focus on our minds. And so 2 years before the 150th anniversary of the Transcontinental Railroad, there were discussions of how do we promote events in DC to coordinate with inevitable events that were going to happen in Promontory. And we thought making the Summit Tunnel was going to be a theme for us. It was going to be one of the great accomplishments to the theme study, which we had been talking about several years before. How do we actually actualize the recommendations in the theme study? So because of our attention on the Summit Tunnel and the tour, we began to build stronger local networks to support the tunnel as a national monument. So then the second tour came about, and there was other things that we began to build into the tour. We began to realize how much education there was to the tour, not just for the Chinese construction of it and how much the Chinese contributed to it, but the engineering and the fact that you brought so many people together, whether they were actually Mormons or Irish or other people that build this thing, or the engineers or the people that were the generals that fought in the Civil War that now begin to take over this national endeavor. And then, so as you learn more, we began to understand that we could make this a huge teaching environment, location or situation. And we began to experiment, how do we do the sustaining tour that is not just about Chinese, but about American history. And so that Summit Tunnel began to take on its own life. It became the main objective. And we began to convene meetings of stakeholders, both in DC, California, and Sacramento, and at the pass. So the year before Transcontinental Railroad, the anniversary of Transcontinental Railroad, we wanted to leverage the anniversary to have a president or Congress announce the selection of the Summit Tunnel a national monument or landmark. So meetings became even more earnest, both in DC and with California stakeholders, including the State Historical Preservation Office, SHPO, which should be the center of all this is happening. It's interesting, just an interesting comment, that of all the agencies we dealt with, SHPO had other priorities. They were probably least interested in working on the Summit Tunnel as they were in doing the theme studies and other things that they were involved in the rest of California. But we became very close to the other local people, especially the U.S. Forest Service up in the Lake Tahoe area, but also the other stakeholders. So, and then what happened was, as these are developing and these coalitions are being made and personal connections are being made, the Department of Interior found some funds to support the nomination of an Asian American site, also to follow up on the theme study. And that site was going to give money, that fund was going to give us money to nominate a place and fast track it to the president for the purpose of nominating that place as either a national landmark or a national monument. So again, that intensified our efforts to work with stakeholders and prime property owners. The five of the most important ones was Sugar Bowl Ski Resort and Union Pacific Railroad, U.S. Forest Service, the Bureau of Land Management, and local historical societies. The thing about it is, of all these people, everybody thought it was a good idea to do it, even the Union Pacific. But I have to say this, the Union Pacific, we thought it was going to be a no-brainer. Everybody was sort of supportive of these things, all the owners. But we did narrow the scope from a monument to a landmark, because a monument does impose a lot of restrictions, what you can do with the property, landmark less so. But the Union Pacific is an interesting group of people. You know, they of course still own the land where the tracks were, the tunnels, the wall, and so they never objected, but they never fully supported us. And so I always mark them down as people we need to build up better relationships and make sure that they're still part of the program. But I would say they are sort of passive objectors to what's going on there. Their goal is that they own the property and they do use it. There's a legitimate reason. There hasn't been a train that ran through those tracks in 20 years. Other tunnels have been built that are better served. Amtrak and other freight trains use those other tunnels. But the Summit Tunnel, the Chinese tunnels, are still used as potential places to relieve blockages and so forth at the other tunnels. So they serve a purpose. But that doesn't mean that they can't be made into a landmark, because the landmark status doesn't take away any rights of the owner to use their property and how they use it. But it does add some protection to it. The Department of the Interior funding originally was to do the whole area, but because of the UP sort of reticent to endorse the project, then we narrowed the scope of the project to the China Camp area. And then we wrote up the justification in such a way that it actually talked about the whole of the Summit Tunnel. So the Department of Interior provided us funding for an archaeological survey, which was another way to nominate a place for listing into the national as a national landmark. And that was, you can list the places on archaeological sites. And so the question was there enough integrity in this site to allow us to make that selection? And we have an archaeologist there. He's being funded right now doing some survey, and there is plenty that he can say that justifies this place as an archaeological site. That archaeological survey would be done this summer. And as soon as that summer project is done, it'll be incorporated into a nomination, passed through the Department of Interior, and we hope fast track to the president. We hope that within 2 years, we might make a decision, but who knows for sure. So in the meantime, what we're doing, more publicity and more public understanding equals more demand that there be a national landmark, if not a monument. The National Trust for Historic Preservation, the 11 most endangered historic places in America, it purposely, in working with them to write up the justification for the selection, we purposely took the widest view to include not just the China Camp, which is the basis for us to nominate the place for a landmark. We took in tunnels 6, 7, and 8 and the China Wall, as well as the surrounding historic pioneer trails and the Native American petrographs. Now that is moving forward to get the landmark status, national landmark status established. But in the meantime, even more important is the establishment of an interpretive program or center on the site. All of us recognize, in order to deal with the graffiti and the people that are trampling all over the place, there has to be some sort of on-site guidance or interpreters there to help people understand what it is they're seeing in the trails they're working on. So we are convening a group that we had convened, and where involves the property owners, and we are including the County of Nevada that crosses the sites, and that we hope that we can develop a collaboration of these people, and we can build onto a site there that's located, a little skiing, a ski shack area, or area near a parking lot that's next to the China camp, and it's next to the shaft, tunnel shaft. And the cost, we think, is about $2,000 to establish that, where it is a seed money to start it. What we hope that to be is a public-private collaborative that has a interpretive center there. Much like when you go to a park, you go to one of the battlefield park, you can go to a center and see some of the history and have a docent there to explain what's going on to you. And this place can also be a research area to talk about the tunnels and how we can develop trails so that we don't destroy the place. So that needs about $200,000 seed money to get that going. So what I'm going to do is close out with images of the tunnel and what you see there and what you're going to remember. These are all photos of the tunnel. Here's a picture of the China Wall. This is a retaining wall built and it's a couple hundred years. I guess it's 1869, 150 years old, and you had tons of track going over there. This is built China Wall, and it's very impressive when you go next to it because you realize there's no mortar, there's nothing there that holds it except the shape and the way that they put it together. And this is all done by Chinese hands, So as much as I think that Summit Tunnel should be made a national monument because of the American story and history it conveys, this wall, when we had our first heritage tour there, we had one of the participants was Jerry from the Salinas Lodge, and she had brought out, I don't know if Jerry's online, but she had brought out some incense and some other things to burn in front of this temple to honor the ancestors and our people that built this thing. I thought that begins to show that not only is it something so important for the nation, it is something that has a special significance for us as Chinese. But one of the things that really drove to me the point of how impactful these tunnels are to us and our heritage is when we made our third heritage tour and we filmed it, we captured a woman who was there, Karen Liu, who made a statement on film that said that she was especially interested in tunnels because she was actually preparing to go back to China to visit her village. And so she thought, well, I'll just go over here and learn a little bit more about my ancestors in preparation for that trip back to the homeland, right? And she said, it occurred to me that really the journey for me actually begins here, not in China. So that's the separation between Chinese Americans and Americans. But most Chinese Americans and Chinese, my trip, she says, having gone here, begins here at this tunnel. But one of the most touching things I thought she said was that I've thought about the tunnel, I've read about it, I understand it, but it was not till I actually walked into the tunnels. And you can walk into the tunnels. You're not supposed to walk in tunnels because the Union Pacific says it's supposed to be off limits, but people are going up and down the tunnels. And you're able to see drill holes that were where Chinese laborers had started a hole to place dynamite, to place black powder and nitroglycerin to build this tunnel. This is the actual part of the tunnel they built. all this done by hand. And she says, you can go there and you touch that space where that drill, that hole was beginning, and you begin to realize it could be that my father, a great grandfather, actually touched this space too. So I think there is a strong connection for us as Chinese Americans to make this place a national and sacred spot for us. But it's also very important for the American, as telling the American story. Here are some resources for you. We do have a representative, 1882 Foundation does, in the up at that area. His name is Phil Sexton. Very articulate, very well informed and fine historian curator. He works at North Lake Tahoe Historical Association, used to work at the California Historical Association, and we used to be director of the Railroad Museum in Sacramento. A couple of things you should pay attention to. I think if anybody has not seen the short documentary, 20 minutes, called Legacy by the U.S. Forest Service, Joe Flannery, please take a look at that. It's a very nice film. The National Trust for Historic Preservation's announcements, you can locate it through this site here. The 1882 Foundation website has information about this heritage tour, as well as our press release on the nomination of the historic tunnel. And this is an article that was recently written by Julie Brown and SF Gate. It's called These Railroad Tunnels, and it's worth reading. So that's it.
Thank you, Ted. Let's see. Oh, are you still? Oh, thank you, Ted, for that. Really, it's quite fascinating that these monuments, and people don't think of a tunnel as a monument, but it really is a testament, right, to what the Chinese did, and all the work. And so I think it's important for us to kind of support this effort, and hopefully in the coming year we can see how we can help move this forward, right, and help support this effort. So thank you, Ted. I would like to next introduce Sue Ellen Chang. She is our CACA very own national historian from the Los Angeles Lodge, and she will be moderating the next two sessions. Sue Ellen, I'll just turn it over to you to do introductions and to start the next session.
Sure. Thank you, Melanie. Good afternoon, everyone. Before introducing our speaker today, please permit me to say a few words about the establishment of the CACA collection at Stanford University Library. The idea of preserving and finding a repository for the CACA collection started when Munson Kwok and Carolyn Chan were national presidents. After more than a dozen years of exploration, planning, and collaborating with our wonderful Stanford friends, Benjamin Lee Stone, who is attending today's session. Thank you for coming. Dr. Roberto Trujillo and Glenn Edwards. An agreement with Stanford University was reached, and the deed of gift was co-signed on September 1st, 2017 by our past national president, Ed Gore, and Michael Keller, the Stanford University librarian. Before we could turn over our precious collection of over 100 years, we were fortunate to have a team of 26 dedicated volunteers who spent more than 1,000 hours in organizing and taking inventory of 3,000 plus files of original documents dated back to 1907. I do want to take this opportunity to acknowledge the amazing works of our entire project team. Some of them are here in this gathering. A few of them came from Taiwan because they have the ability to read and write Chinese language. And we have San Francisco Lodge, and later if I have a chance, I'll share slides of their names. Thank you all. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce to you our speaker, Elisa Tao. Elisa joined Stanford in 2019, soon after receiving her Master of Library and Information Science from UCLA. And currently she is a project archivist at the Stanford Library and has been responsible for processing over 200 linear feet of the CACA collection. Elisa is here to share her experience in working with the collection and some of the interesting items that she has discovered so far. Welcome, Elisa. Here you are.
Thank you, Sue Ellen, for the introduction. Let me share my PowerPoint with you all. Can you all see this properly, everybody?
Yes.
Okay, I'm happy to be able to join you today. And today I'll be talking a little bit about my work with the records for your organization, the Chinese American Citizens Alliance, a little bit of what I've done, and show you all some of the files I've come across. And Sue Ellen preemptively went and did my first slide where she introduced everything you all have done in order to prepare the collection to come to Stanford University. So we had the agreement to house the archives, followed by the very lengthy work that your team of volunteers led by Sue Ellen did to prepare the materials for transfer and to make an inventory list, which were all very helpful for me when I was starting to work on these and properly arrange them. And then I was hired in 2019, and that's when work on this started. We've had some pandemic delays due to the shelter-in-place orders starting in March of 2020, but I have since come back and I have been working very hard in it, and we are now coming almost done. So I wanted to start out with some photos of the collection, starting from where they were first in the Grand Lodge's vault, which Sue Ellen was very kind to share with me. So you can see here on the left, all of the books and documents on the shelves that are like visible for you all to see. And then the boxes on the bottom as you're preparing to start to send them over. And this picture image on the right is the collection as it's partially processed here at our facility and at Stanford in Redwood City. And you can see about half of these have been put into prop manuscript, archival manuscript boxes. And some of them are still waiting to be still in the original record storage boxes, waiting to be processed. And the table is full of papers that I'm sorting that are also waiting to be properly folded and put into their appropriate boxes. And all of these white boxes on the tops of the shelves are what the documents originally came in as they were sent by the CACA. And this is what they look like today. So they've all been, everything has been transferred into appropriate manuscript boxes, into the flat boxes. They've all been given labels identifying them and a barcode so that they can be entered into the system so that they can be paged. And so an important outcome of this project was to create a finding aid, which gives potential researchers a guide to the collection and allows them to be able to identify any parts that they want to page. It's arranged into series and subseries. You can see I've taken a screenshot of our information management system archive space to show a little bit about what the back end looks like. And I've given all of them titles and properly organized everything into their appropriate folders. And each of the files is divided and put into an appropriate subseries. And then after work in archive space is done, it's then properly uploaded, which populates its entry on the Online Archive of California. In this finding aid, I've also tried to point to a number of collections at other institutions related to the CACA. So for example, the Huntington Library in Southern California houses the Hong family papers, the Kenneth Fung papers, and the Suhu family papers, all who were very influential in the CACA in its early years. At the moment, the funding aid is available to view, but is still undergoing some final revisions as it edits, as it is easier to see what needs to be fixed when it's visible in OAC rather than in archive space, as you can kind of see from the comparison. So then I wanted to start talking about some of the interesting finds that I found as I've been processing the collection, because the CACA has a very long history, and there are certainly many interesting documents that it has generated throughout that time. Now I heard that I see that the Portland Lodge is having its centennial, or last year, but you're celebrating it at this conference. So I've included a picture of the charter roll and the application for charter of the Portland Lodge, dating from 1920, with the signatures of the founding members and the original lodge president and the original officers. And you can see that here. And then I've included a invitation. One of the key things that happened in the very beginning of the organization's history is that they really wanted to have a place that was their own building. So they built the headquarters for their Grand Lodge, and this red paper on the right is an invitation to the grand opening of that headquarters, accompanied by a poem that talks about who the Chinese Americans are, that they're here, that they want to stay here for a long time, that they also want to prosper and exist in America in the future, and that they're here to stay. The collection is quite a trove for those interested in genealogy and family records, with thousands of individual applications for membership into the organization. I've provided here two examples, one dating to 1916 for a man named Tom Gee to the Los Angeles Lodge, and the other one, 1952, to the San Francisco Lodge for a man named Edward Leong Wei. These give a bit of a snapshot into the lives of the Chinese Americans who wanted to join the CACA. They had to include the names of their parents and spouse and the number of children, as well as other information like their place of birth and their occupation. In addition to its use in family history research, one can also use these files to look at the evolution in the membership of the CACA and how the origins and lives of Chinese Americans changed over time. Even if you can't see all the words clearly on your screens, it should still be evident the changes that were made to the format of the application, and it's gone from having the personal information part entirely in Chinese and the official admission part in English to being more or less entirely in English, except for the part where you have to write your Chinese name. I also have here an application for a wartime identification card. Due to the state of war between Japan and the US in the 1940s, many Chinese were afraid of being perceived as a Japanese and as an enemy. And so the CACA provided these cards, which would serve as proof that an individual was a Chinese American. Not only adult men and women had them, but their parents would often also acquire one for their children. The one I've included here is for a student at the time about 14 years of age. And these were all created within 1941 to 1942. The program was not limited to CACA members, but was open to the wider community. And on the right here, I've also included a letter discussing the need for a sticker or sign to put in shop and car windows to broadcast to others that the individual was a Chinese American, accompanied by an example of that kind of sticker. And you can see it's got the American flag, Chinese flag, and it has a plane. It says the Chinese American to properly broadcast that we are Chinese American and we are American, but we are also Chinese. So the CACA was heavily involved in the matter of civil rights for American Chinese, as I'm sure you all know, which naturally extended to immigration, as with such discriminatory laws as the Chinese Exclusion Act and other barriers to entry. It was very difficult for them to move around, go abroad, or bring their families to America. In addition to lobbying, the CACA was also directly involved in assisting their members with immigration matters. So I've included here two more images. One is of an investigation whereby a man named Ju Ten Lim accused a member of the organization of extorting money from him in exchange for facilitating the immigration of his wife. So since this was an internal matter and one of their members had supposedly done criminal acts, the CACA had to investigate, and this is the first page of their investigation, led by Walter Lum, Li Thing, Ju Hing Juk, and Tong Hei Sam and Harry Yip, who I'm sure you've heard some of these names before, as they were the presidents and on the board for the CACA in the past. And on the right is an affidavit for a man named Liu Nan for his son, and a letter from Los Angeles Lodge on the ship status of that son. So the Los Angeles Lodge, after they received these necessary documents, they sent a letter to the Grand Lodge telling them that they did have the necessary paperwork, but at the moment they were still waiting for the sons who were on a ship that was in the harbor but hadn't yet docked to allow them to disembark. And these are just brief looks into some of the immigration stories of Chinese coming to America and those who already lived here but wanted to bring their families over as well. I'm also here to show you some other letters. One of these, which is on the left, is of a Chinese American soldier in the Air Corps who was stationed at the US-Mexico border in the 1940s, who writes about discrimination he faced there when he and some fellow non-Chinese soldiers went to visit Mexico, which by the agreement at the time was allowed for US soldiers, but he was stopped despite his uniform, with the implication that he was not an American or was not recognized as one. His companions were not detained in such a way. And out of the organization's work fighting against discriminatory laws, there is quite a significant body of papers relating to the Dickstein Equal Nationality Bill, or the Dickstein-Copeland Bill. Its main goal was to allow citizenship to pass through either the father or the mother to the child, but contained a clause that the CACA feared was discriminatory towards Chinese who already had much stronger restrictions on immigration and nationality than others. The image on the right is of a letter from the conclusion of this case. It's from Kenneth Fung, talking about that it was determined that there would not be undue restrictions on the citizenship of a child of a Chinese American man who had been born abroad to a Chinese wife. And this came about after a lot of lobbying on the part of the CACA to try and get things clarified and to make sure that there would be no wiggle room for discrimination to occur, at least under the restrictions of this particular law. And of course, the activities of the CACA weren't necessarily all of a serious nature. In this set of images are some of their more community-focused works. One is a letter asking the CACA for advice on how to spread the word around that a Stanford lineman at the University of California would be giving a course on race relations. And since the Chinese American Citizen Science had experience doing disseminating information, they wanted to know how they could reach a wider community and let people know that this was a course of interest that people could come attend. And the other on the right here is from the Miss Chinatown pageant of 1951, with an image of a Miss Lily Wong and a brief introduction and description of her in Chinese. It talks a little about who she is, and where she's come from and some of her distinct traits. But the CACA also kept a number of publications and periodicals that had accumulated over the years. While many of them are relatively easy to find elsewhere, there are also issues of a newspaper which, as far as I can tell, do not exist in an easily findable way elsewhere. A publication by the Hawaiian Historical Society in 2000 had found no holdings of this particular paper, the Pacific Herald, but the CACA has saved a number of issues from the paper's first 2 years of existence. So that's a very interesting thing to have, that we cannot find it in other places. Something unique to this collection, perhaps, or perhaps it exists in other collections and we simply don't know where they are. So these are just a few of the documents that I chanced upon while processing. In total, these records ended up filling about 184 linear feet. So 348 manuscript boxes, 27 flat boxes, 2 card boxes, and 1 half box. As you saw, look at that to get an idea of it at the very beginning of this presentation. Naturally, there is a lot more than I can show you in this brief look at the archives. As the project is in the process of wrapping up, I'll let you know a little bit of what still needs to be done. So I'm waiting for some documents that were in a more difficult condition, stuck together pages, melted rubber bands. And I sent them to conservation, and I'm waiting for them to come back so that they can be properly housed back in their boxes. And since the collection is not stored in this place in which I'm processing them, they also have to be sent on to their actual home in one of the library's auxiliary facilities before they can be paged by researchers. But even now, we've had some people reaching out to ask about it, some for the research and some who just want to find out a little more about their families who might have been involved with this organization. And there's still the matter of digitization. I flagged a few articles and documents that seem like they may be valuable to digitize, but there's more work that needs to be done in that area. Though I will be helping out with deciding on relevant files, the bulk of it will not be, the bulk of the digitization action will not be performed by me. I hope you've all learned something interesting from this brief look at the archives housing the history of the CACA. It truly was an educational experience for me to be able to work with it, and I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. That was wonderful, and really appreciate your tremendous effort to put this collection into hopefully more usable soon for the public and the researchers. And you did say that you have some inquiries actually already from scholars and students, and that they are available for them.
That's right. So the collection is now, we've officially opened the collection for research, but most of the inquiries that we've had so far have come as I was during processing. And what I've done is I just looked at if it was specific enough, I could go and find the document and give them a copy of it or tell them what was on the file if they were looking for something specific.
Thanks. And we are, as you said, that the next step is really digitization, and we continue working with the Stanford and discussing the future projects, what is priorities and all that, including materials that relating to anti-racism and the civil rights, as well as, like you mentioned, the primary resources for people who are interested in searching their family histories. And just a couple of days ago, we received an inquiry from from a person who found grandfather's membership certificates, membership card actually of 1920. And she was wondering, she heard about our collection and wondering how she could look into the collection, such as a membership application. And this type of inquiries, are you ready to accept or not quite yet?
Well, so we probably would want to wait for everything to be like once everything is completely finished in order to start receiving like a lot more inquiries. But anything that's on the more minor side and like something that can be relatively easily found, I could probably go look for that and give you some brief information. But I wouldn't be doing like an entire research project, of course.
I would like to ask anyone who would like, Karen is raising your hand, please.
Yes, I'm the one, I think, that you
yes,
that you had asked about that. And I actually found this organization by finding my great grandfather's membership card. I actually had never heard of it before, and I did a Google search, and then I found it, and we don't know that much about him because my grandfather died when my father was very young. And it was after that my grandmother and grandfather passed away that we found these documents, and I didn't know what an SGS, Chinese American, this organization is basically. And so I reached out to the organization, and I just want to find like names, like when was my great grandfather born? Where was he born? I don't even know his parents' name or how far back my family goes back, in this country. So, I mean, I basically am just looking for, I guess, his parents' name and where he was born, just kind of as a clue. Because it was really surprising to us, actually, that we had a great grandfather that was actually born in this country. Yeah.
Yeah, so since it looks like you do have the membership card with the membership number for your great grandfather, then it shouldn't be and you know what lodge he belonged to, then it should certainly be reasonably straightforward to look him up, because all of these membership files are organized by membership number. So if we know where he was located out of, then we can probably find his membership application.
Okay, that's awesome. Thank you so much. I'll reach out to you and I'll send you both. I have an ID card with his picture on it, as well as the membership card. And I'm so glad I found this organization. I've been listening this morning, and it's something that I think I would like to be a part of. So I'm going to reach out to the San Francisco chapter to see how I can get involved. So this is awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. And we have another question. What is the latest piece of documentation being recorded at Stanford, and the earliest one?
So the latest, the most recent piece of documentation that is currently housed at Stanford that I could find is from 2005. I'd have to look up exactly what kind of document it is, but I believe it was from 2005. And although the original organization was formed in 1895, the earliest documents we have that are in this collection are from 1912, which is when it was reorganized into all the individual lodges.
And we have another question from Chicago Lodge. Ask if she gave you her grandfather and father's name, can she find out they joined and when they left?
It's a little harder, I think, to find out when they left, because I have encountered a couple of documents, more recent documents, that talked about people saying, please stop sending me requests to pay the membership dues because I don't want to be a member anymore. And if you have their Chinese names, it will be easier to find them, especially if they were earlier members. But without seeing what kind of documents you have or what kind of information, it will be a little hard to say for sure whether we can find it like in a quick manner. Of course, if you wanted to, once the collection is sent out and you wanted to come in and look at the Portland Lodge and the Chicago Lodge membership rosters, you could certainly do that.
Great. I know that our time runs so quickly, and it was a wonderful discussion here. If there's no more question, I think I want to take this opportunity to thank you again, to thank Stanford, and also to thank our volunteers, the team, and so we would like to conclude today's session right here. And I know we have another session coming in. Melanie, give this back to you.
Well, thank you, Sue Ellen, and thank you, Alyssa, for, it's incredible to see those papers going from these random boxes to such an organized fashion. And I think there's a lot of interest in just seeing all the history, right, in a continuous manner. So thank you for all your work. Our next session is going to be starting at 1:30. So we're going to take a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back at 10:30 for our next session. It is a different Zoom link. So I will be closing this Zoom session, and then let's rejoin at 1:30, and I'll see everybody in 10 minutes. Thank you. government